Hello, and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I'm very excited for today's show because we are talking ballot initiatives. But before I introduce my guests, we have a lot going on at the Colorado Business Roundtable, so I'd like to take a moment here to ask our audience to check out cobrt.com. Go ahead and sign up for our newsletter. That new issue just came out today. We also have a radio page there. You can check out this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast, as well as our events page. We have tons of new events coming out all the time, but one big one that we're focused on right now is on October 30th. That is a Tuesday, 7 o'clock a.m. at History, Colorado. We are having a cybersecurity event with CSU Global, and we are so excited for that. We will be providing breakfast for you and a panel from Deloitte, IBM, AT&T, and Microsoft. So that is exciting stuff we have going on, but I would like to go ahead and jump into today's show with Kelly Sloan of Sloan and Associates, as well as a new title you brought me today, Policy Director for Principles That Matter. So how are you, Kelly?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me on again.
Yes.
Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about this new position that you have.
So
exciting.
Yeah, Principles That Matter is a new think tank, Colorado-based. What we're doing is putting policy together, policy analysis, and we're trying to communicate it to the average voter. Take it down, try and dilute some of these issues into, something that the average voter can digest and kind of understand a little bit better.
Are you saying that some ballots are written with tough legalese?
Well, some policies themselves. I mean, you look at whether it's a criminal justice policy or transportation, energy. There's a lot there. So we try and to tear it down and find what are some of the key elements to the issue. What are some of the conservative arguments? What are some of the liberal arguments and counter arguments? That kind of thing. What are some resources you can go to find out more about this? That kind of thing. So it's pretty exciting. We just finished up our closing arguments series, which was a series of phone calls and events around the state to talk about some of the key issues in each part of the state. With some policy experts, not just obviously from our institute, but from Independence Institute, Centennial Institute, where I'm also a fellow. People like Sandra Solon talking about transportation. It was fantastic. We're really excited about it. So
that is really exciting, and yeah. I like that you're aiming for the average voter, right?
Right.
Not everyone has a degree with legal knowledge, right? And policy knowledge, and so it's exciting that you're bringing that out and making that available for everyone. Where can I find more information?
If you go to coloradopolicy.org or principlesthatmatter.com, you can find out some more information on us.
Wonderful. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Kelly, we have a lot on our plate right now with ballot initiatives. We know that we have an election coming up next month, and that's going to change some administration here in Colorado. Very exciting stuff. But let's take a bit of a dive into some of your favorite initiatives.
Sure. Well, we seem to comment every year about the gestating nature of the ballot, how it seems to every year get larger and larger, longer and longer. And this year's no exception. We have, here are the numbers. We have 13 statewide ballot measures this year. 9 of them are constitutional amendments. 6 of those constitutional amendments are referred measures coming from the General Assembly, and 3 are citizen initiatives. And then there are 4 statutory initiatives. So that's just state level. And of course, just about every county and municipality has their own slate of various initiatives, from tax measures to bonding measures to campaign finance measures, you name it. So there is quite a bit to talk about. One observation, I think it's striking that there's a lot of tax measures this year, both locally and statewide. Of course, there's 2. Usually, I won't say lucky. You have 1 on there. We have 2 major tax initiatives statewide going along right now. And I think part of the reason for that is this general sense that this is a fairly democratic year, democratic inclined election. Of course, the minority party, looking at it federally, in the midterms generally is thought to have a bit of an electoral advantage. I don't think there's too much different this year about that. I think I think a lot of people that are looking to get tax increases for one thing or another are looking at this year and thinking, this may be our best bet to actually get something passed. With the, obviously if you're inclined to support the Democratic Party, you're more inclined to support the idea of the functionality of government and to fund it through additional tax dollars. So I think that's playing into a little bit why we're seeing so much on the ballot this year. So I'd like to talk about, some of those tax measures, statewide and local, in a minute. But I should like to go through, I think, all the ballot measures. A lot of them, I think we haven't, especially, talk a little bit about the ones that really haven't been examined very in depth, on this program. And then discuss a little bit more some of the ones I really want to discuss, as long as you don't unplug my mic. So
we'll see how far you get. We'll play it by ear.
Right. So I think we'll just go in order, starting with the referred measures. And again, referred measures are constitutional amendments that go through the General Assembly. They generally, they require all 100 legislators to vote for them. So the idea is they're fairly well vetted by the time they get there. The first one's Amendment A. That one is to remove any references to slavery from the Constitution. Now, of course, we're not a slave state. We never have been. In the Constitution right now, it says that slavery is prohibited except as a punishment for a crime. So slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. So they want to take that reference right out of there so that it's not allowed for anything. This is its second go around. It went through two years ago as well and got defeated. And I think some of the opposition to it is people are saying, well, wait a minute, what about prisoners? If they're on work assignments, certainly we're not going to be paying them the market rate for making license plates or furniture, whatever they do. Would this prohibit prison labor or community service or things like that? And I think the answer is no. And the reason I'm fairly confident in saying that is, again, as a referred measure, this has gone through the legislature, and in so doing, it was looked at by all kinds of lobbyists, all kinds of departments, and including the Department of Corrections. And I'm sure their lawyers would have scrutinized this. And were there any concerns about that, or about another concern I heard potentially was that, well, would this allow inmates to sue to get minimum wage or workers' comp or some of these other things that are that free workers are entitled to. But again, I think that it would have been scrutinized by corrections lawyers deeply enough that had there been an issue with that would have been brought to light by now. Plus, other states have done the same thing, and they still have prison work programs.
Well, I would imagine that a form of slavery would be considered a cruel and unusual punishment, correct?
Well, sure, and you got to remember too, these work assignments, they're all voluntary. Nobody's forcing these guys. Exactly. Now, I don't think you really have to twist their arms. I think most of them kind of leap at the opportunity to right.
Well, and you're not even considered half the time unless you've had some good behavior, right? They're not going to let you leave the facility if you aren't exhibiting some,
Right, absolutely. Or even, and they are paid. I mean, not a whole lot, but they're paid, through the commissary program. So no, I think we're fairly safe, and we should be fairly reassured that this isn't going to outlaw prison labor.
Yes. Absolutely.
So, I don't know if you want my recommendations on any of these or how much my endorsement helps or hurts, but
why not? Go ahead.
I'd say I can reassure you. You're probably safe voting yes on this one.
All right. I'm going to concur.
So next one is V, and that one that's kind of an interesting one. It's to lower the minimum age to serve in the state legislature to 21. Currently, it's 25. Now, the argument behind it, of course, is if at age 18 you're expected to be able to don a uniform and fight for your country and vote, that perhaps you should be allowed to, at age 21, should be sufficient time to be able to serve in the state legislature. I guess my argument, I was one of those 18-year-old people in uniform, and I can assure you that I and some of my comrades were well qualified for that position, maybe not so much for making society's laws. The counter argument, of course, to this one is that such a position requires some life experience, a little bit of seasoning, as it were, in how life operates.
Right.
Again, it's one of these that went through the state legislature. Will it hurt anything? I don't know. You still have to go through an election. So if your inexperience shows itself clearly enough, then you won't win the election. Again, my personal view is that that's an august enough position that it requires a little bit of life experience. So.
And I think it's one of those, because you definitely, I mean, even now you see some people that are well over the age of 21 that are running for positions, and maybe still don't have that life experience, right? They've only lived in one bubble.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some bright 21-year-olds out there that would make great state legislatures. I know there's plenty of 26-year-olds that wouldn't elect to anything. I'm a little skeptical of youth, I guess. Sometimes, especially as I get old and curmudgeonly my own self. If a gun was held to my head, I think I'd say no on this one.
All right. I'm going to disagree.
Fair enough. And I just disenfranchised myself to the 21 to 25 crowd. W is changing the ballot format for judge and justice retention elections. So, of course, in this state, we vote to retain judges. We don't vote for them, but at the various levels for judges and justices, they say, right now it's worded, do you wish to retain Judge Hopkins? Then again it says, do you wish to retain Judge Sloan? Do you wish to retain Judge Pollard? And it's repetitive throughout, and that of course adds to the length of the ballot. And let's face it, on a section of the ballot that's not really the most exciting for most people. So what this amendment proposes to do is to kind of shorten that language, tighten it up a little bit, just have the one question, do you wish to retain the following judges? And then list them, and yes or no, Judge Hopkins, Judge Pollard, Judge Sloan, yes or no. You still, it's not a slate, you say, shall we keep all the judges, yes or no? You still vote to retain each one, but it just makes the language a little tighter. I think it's a good idea. It'll save the clerks and recorders like it. It was their idea.
Yeah.
It should save the county some money on printing ballots, which isn't an insignificant cost. And I don't think it really changes anything. I don't think you need that superfluous language on there every judge.
Well,
so.
I don't see any reason why not to vote yes, which is where I'm sure you were going with that. But
that's where I was going with that. Yes.
This one seems a little. A little over the top for me that we have to vote on that.
It is a constitutional amendment.
Yes.
So, we're in a state where, one of the steps to getting something put into the Constitution, and it's in the Constitution, and so might be a good place to add, some things belong in the Constitution and some don't.
Right.
As you know, I was part of the Raise the Bar effort last year because we're getting so many bells and whistles, as it were, put into the state Constitution. Everybody that had a good idea or a god-awful idea wanted to get it enthroned in there, cemented in there for forever and a day. So you put it in the Constitution because it's the basic law of the land. It's harder to change, that kind of thing. And it should be. Yes. But it should not be. It should be reserved for the basic structure of how we govern ourselves. And this is one of those things that deserves to be in there because it's how we vote. Again, kind of the framework or the blueprint for how we govern ourselves, how we run elections. How we elect our representatives or
the bones,
judges,
if you will.
Absolutely, the skeletal structure of our state should be in the Constitution. So that's why it's an amendment. That's why we're voting on it.
Gotcha.
So I would recommend a sure on that one. X is the next one. What this one does is removes. So this is an interesting one. It actually removes the definition of hemp from the Constitution and makes it statutory instead. Right now, the definition is in the Constitution. It's one of those things I think several years ago that somebody thought was a great idea to cement. It was also kind of a counterbalance against the federal government, which has their own definition of hemp, which is a little bit different than ours. Now they're anticipating within the next year or two that that's going to change, and the federal government is going to kind of relax some of their rules on definition and leave it up to the states. At which point, it seems like a good idea that as things change, we'd be able to adjust our definition of hemp with it, especially as it grows as a crop. And I like this. Full disclosure, I represent the aerial applicators, the Agricultural Aviation Association. Of course, we would like a say and make sure they don't come up with some ridiculous definition that hemp can only be sold if it's not treated with pesticides or some silly thing like that. So it allows everybody a seat at the table and allows us to change the definition without going through a lot more hoops like we just talked about getting something in the Constitution. So I would urge a yes vote on that one as well, for what that's worth.
Yeah.
Now, two of my favorites, Y and Z. Those are redistricting and reapportionment. Redistricting, of course, refers to redistricting the congressional districts in the state. Reapportionment, redistricting the state House and Senate districts. There's two of them, one to deal with each because of single subject laws at the state. And what these are aimed to do is to do away with the practice of gerrymandering, as far as it can. I'm sure most of your listeners know that gerrymandering is the practice of one political party or another, activists operatives from one political party or the other, manipulating the process of drawing the borders for the districts in a way that advantages one party or the other for political reasons. Simpler language, it's gerrymandering is voters choosing their electors rather than the other way around. So what this does, the way it works currently for congressional districts, it's left up to the legislature. So of course what happens is you get, especially in a split chamber, you have a Republican map and a Democratic map. They don't agree, as you can imagine. They're going to be wildly different. So it goes to the courts. And it ends up being usually a single judge that decides what map is used. And of course, judges, as we just talked about, they have their political leanings as well. So it's speaking as a conservative, it's in the last few cycles not been to the favor of Republicans. And at state level, it's done a little bit differently. It's a commission, but it's got appointees from two from each chamber from leadership. So a minority and a majority leader from each chamber get to choose somebody. The governor gets 4 appointees on there. Of course, that's not a nonpartisan position. And the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, him or herself, of course, appointed by a politician, one party or the other, gets 4 positions on there. Those maps always end up in court as well. And again, you have a judge that, that is selecting which maps we're using. Some of the results of this have been, in the last 10 years, in the State House, we've turned over 3 times, I believe it is, parties.
Well, the interesting thing about Amendment Y and Z here is that this seems to be one that people are working across the aisle on. It's gotten the majority of the backing from both sides of the aisle.
It has, actually. That's actually one.
Won't you go dying on me?
No, not yet. Not till I'm done here.
Yeah. Well, sorry about that. We got you all choked up on this, these amendments here. But yeah, the Amendment Y and Z, I had a couple of people join me last week or so talking about Amendment Y and Z, and so I had a whole show on that, and that was really interesting. Again, You can find that on our radio page. Check out Amendment Y and Z, or Yes on Amendment Y and Z, and you can find that episode for more information on that particular amendment that we have.
Yeah, and oddly, amendments. Hey, I'm back. Oddly, one of the arguments against it from either side is that, well, you have all these people that we never agree with. So for Republicans, they're looking at this list. The ACLU's on there, AFL-CIO, Progress Now, all these groups that we disagree on what side the sun comes up on with.
Right.
On the other side, of course, they're looking at it and seeing Independence Institute, Centennial Institute, all these chambers, all these Republican figures on there, and saying, how could we support that? Well, I think both sides realize that it's a broken system. Both sides realize, the pendulum can swing either way. Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of this one. So, what it does, just real briefly, is that it takes it out of partisan hands and instead does it through an independent commission. Now, the commission is made up of 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and 4 unaffiliateds. That pool of applicants for those positions is vetted and narrowed down by a panel of 3 judges, retired judges, so it kind of takes the politics out of the selection process. Again, that panel of judges is a Republican, Democrat, and unaffiliated as well. The first 6 positions are decided by lottery after they've narrowed it down. And I should note that there's some further protections in there that if you to be considered for it, you've had to have been a Republican or a Democrat or undecided for the previous 5 years. So you can't decide this morning that you're, that I'm suddenly a Democrat and apply to be on this panel. So that's part of it. And then the last 6 positions are chosen by this independent panel of judges. It's a much more open process than it was before. The meetings are all subject to open meeting laws, sunshine laws, open records requests. Anybody can submit a map, and it's studied and looked at by this commission. The nonpartisan legislative staff, which are the lawyers and so forth at the Capitol that help draft our bills, they're the ones that actually do the drawing. And any map that comes out of it goes through public scrutiny, and it has to be a super majority of this board, including at least 2 unaffiliateds, to accept a map. So it sets the bar a lot higher for judicial review, so it takes it out of the hands of the courts, and for the most part, it takes it out of partisan hands and makes it as independent and nonpartisan as possible. So I think they're both good, and I would urge a strong yes, because we really need to take the politics out of that that 100%, process.
100%, yes, for sure.
Well, in the couple minutes we have left, I would love to rail on a little bit about 73.
Let's do it.
It's a tax increase, ostensibly for education. Now, regardless of what it does or doesn't do, and I made an argument in the column a few times this year that tax increases going to education tend not to get to the classroom; they tend to go to administration. My biggest concern with 73 is what it does to the income tax. It reasserts the progressive tax. Right now we're a flat tax state, so we're income tax, everybody pays the same rate. But what this does is reinserts brackets and reimposes a progressive tax in the state. Friedrich Hayek, the economist, in his great book, The Constitution of Liberty, characterized the progressive tax as the worst economic idea since the market was developed, and I think he's right. And that, among other things, that's what this would do. It would be a huge tax increase. The brackets are not indexed to inflation, so whereas right now, if you're making $150,000, you're hit with a massive increase. Well, in about 15 years, most of us are going to be there, and we'll be hit with that tax increase as well. Also raises the sales tax. It's a terrible one. Vote no as hard as you can on that one.
Well, Kelly, thank you. We will be right back after this break.
You bet.
Stay with us here on Connect and Collaborate. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here, and we have another guest coming up in the next segment, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and we are talking ballot initiatives coming up in this next big vote that we've got going on in November. So very exciting stuff. I have in studio with me, again, Kelly Sloan. He is with Sloan and Associates, as well as the policy director, for
Yes.
Principles That Matter.
That's right.
Very exciting. So again, congratulations on that. I don't think I said that earlier,
not
but
at all.
I meant to. And,
thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. So we are going through these amendments. We just finished with 73. You gave a no recommendation. Vote no.
Very much no. Yes.
Very much
a hard no.
Yes. So we've got a few more to cover. Let's finish that up.
A couple more to cover real quick, and I'll try and remember how to breathe and speak at the same time.
Wonderful. Always appreciate it.
For this segment. 74, and that's a fairly complicated one that's out there. I won't speak too much on it. I know you're going to have a guest in
on
next week.
Actually. Or yes, next Thursday. We are talking about that.
Who would be able to speak far more competently than I would on it. What it does is it expands on the current constitutional provision that says if the government, through some regulatory action or law, devalues your property, that you're justly compensated for it. Right now, the courts have said that the compensatory nature only comes in after about 90%. So if your property value is decreased by 90%, then you can be compensated. This is giving the court some direction that no, it's far less than that. It's pretty much any taking. It's left a little bit vague, so it is leaving it up to the courts to kind of hash out, because it is a constitutional measure, and I think the proponents didn't want to put anything too overly prescriptive, again, in the Constitution, which I think is appropriate. And we won't delve on this one too much. I know local governments have some get queasy about this one, knowing that it will open up some lawsuits. It will be tested in court. There's no question about that. I guess my position is generally to default to private property rights, and if a local government's too worried about lawsuits, then don't put in regulations that devalue property. And it does leave in place some of the directions to the court about it can't be speculative, and it can't be frivolous. Like I can't decide. I have some farmland out there. I think gosh darn, if I put a hotel up here, it'd make me a whole bunch of money. But it's zoned agriculture. The county says, yeah, no, I can't. That's not what it's talking about.
Right.
Anyway, so moving on from that, 75 deals with campaign finance limits. This one's a little topical. What it's saying is that if, for example, Alex, you and I are running for the same office, you happen, with your millions of dollars that you have, want to put in more than $1 million of your own money to self-finance, and of course I can't. I'm relying on mostly donations. If you self-fund your campaign for $1 million or more, then all your opponents' campaign limits go up by 5 times. So it kind of closes that loophole that we have right now of millionaires that can put in $5, $6, $30 million or more of their own money and leave everybody else in the dust. I believe the numbers are the last gubernatorial election, Governor Hickenlooper raised $6 million. I think we're upwards of 30 million or something like that on one side right now. So it makes it so you can't buy elections. Personally, I would rather just see campaign contribution limits go away. And part of the reason it caused all this is we do have some of the most stringent campaign contribution limits in the country. So it kind of encourages people that have a lot of money to come in and self-finance their campaigns and do this. So that kind of equalizes it out. I do want to mention really quick, there is one in Denver campaign finance ballot measure that would have public money go towards campaigns. So it would match, I believe the city would give a candidate $9 for every dollar they raise from donations, with a limit of $450 in matching funds for each individual donor. And I hate this one. I don't think, my tax money should be going to fund a campaign of somebody I disagree with. So if you're in Denver, find that one and vote no on it.
I don't think that your tax money should go to one, even if you do agree with them,
absolutely.
right? Exactly.
Well, no,
that's my tax.
absolutely,
my taxes
yes.
should be going to roads and education and not.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
my opinion, of course.
So the last 4, I'm not really going to talk about them very much because I think we've talked about them quite a bit.
Yes.
109 and 110 are the 2 competing transportation ones. 109, the fix the damn roads. Can we say that now?
We can.
Okay, great.
We can.
Which allows for bonding without a tax increase and funds it through existing funds. Considering we have a $30 billion budget, we should be able to find that. And 110 is the tax increase. It does the same thing. It's still bonds. but you funds it through a tax increase. Also includes more transit programs. So I like 109. I'd like to fix dam roads. I'll let your listeners decide for themselves. Well, let the listeners decide for themselves on any of them.
Well,
really.
absolutely.
111 would has to do with payday loans. It would put a cap on the interest they can charge. Arguments against that is that, look, these, let's face it, these are not the best financial tools to use, but they are available for people that can't get loans anywhere else. They need to set their interest rates high because these are loans that are generally defaulted on fairly often, and they're small amounts. The argument for these is, that it's kind of equivalent to loan sharking, what they're being set at. Some are at 200% or more. So, and they're not good financial tools. Kind of comes down to whether that's the government's decision of whether this is a good financial tool or we should leave it up to the individual voter. I really have no position on that one. And of course, 112, just vote no. That's it. Just
that's all you're going to say.
There's lots of red signs out there to tell you how to vote on that one.
Well, and I will
pay attention to them.
I think one of the most interesting things that I've heard on 112 is that neither Polis nor Stapleton are supporting 112, and they have very different stances on their opinions of oil and gas in Colorado. So I found that fascinating.
Absolutely. Whatever your opinion is on environmental, the result is going to be economically devastating for the state. There's no two ways about that. Before we get to our guest, I do want to mention that if you live in Denver, there are, I believe, 4 separate measures to raise taxes on the Denver ballot. I won't go through all of them. I will say that if all local measures passed, include the local measures passed, the Denver sales tax rate would go from 3.6% to 4.23%. And if all state and local tax measures pass, remember we have 2 statewide ones, the total aggregate sales tax in Denver would go from 7.65% to nearly 9%. So, again, it's interesting that we have so many tax increases on ballots around the state this year, Denver in particular.
Yes.
So, on that note, I do want to bring in our guest. Speaking of taxes, the business personal property tax, it's widely considered among members of the business community to be one of the most pernicious contributors to the overhead of enterprise in the state. It's essentially a tax imposed on everything a business has that can be moved, i.e. everything except real estate. There have been several efforts at the state legislature to repeal this tax. They've all failed over the years, prompting one Colorado county to take matters in their own hands and repeal it of their own accord. So to discuss this, we were joined by the prime mover behind that counter-revolutionary act, Kristi Pollard, who is the president and CEO of the Jefferson County Economic Development Corporation. Mrs. Pollard graduated what was then known as Mesa State College, now known as Colorado Mesa University, with a Bachelor of Arts. She worked for Senator Wayne Allard for several years as his area director, and since then has helped numerous economic development projects, held numerous positions in that field, ran her own consulting company, headed up the Grand Junction Economic Partnership, a position she held prior to accepting her current position, in which capacity we welcome her now. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I'd like to begin by asking Ms. Pollard, is my characterization of the business personal property tax accurate, and why did Jefferson County do what they did?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the risk of sounding like a zealot, yes, the business personal property tax is an overreaching, investment hindering tax, and it completely distorts the market because it discourages businesses from investing in more capital in expansion and replacement. It's kind of like the death tax. We're going to punish people for dying. It is businesses are working hard every day and they want to invest and they want to do more, and this is a tax that's discouraging it. So we were proud to have been a part of working with our local county commissioners to eliminate it at the county level.
So tell us a little bit about what exactly you did. What was repealed, what wasn't repealed. There was an excellent column appeared in Colorado Politics about a week ago.
Yes, thank you.
May or may not have been written by me. Well, in which I point out that, as a measure, it's not really that terribly expansive. It's fairly moderate.
Yeah.
So what did you do? What didn't you do? Kind of how does it work, and what's the scope of the repeal?
You bet. So, with any advocacy, you walk through the doors when you have elected officials who are willing to participate in working with you. And we were fortunate in that regard, and that Commissioner Libby Szabo in Jefferson County was very open to repealing the county's portion of business personal property tax. The times at the state, there have been a lot of conversations about completely eliminating it, and it gets wrapped up in special districts, and it's their only source of revenue, and schools, and how do you replace. And so we knew that we could get it done at the county level, so we thought, let's take that bite-size approach. So Jefferson County in just this last month has agreed to eliminate the county's portion of business personal property tax. It holds the special districts harmless. It holds the library harmless. It also holds some things within their general fund, such as mental health, harmless. But they agreed. It's 1.3% of their total budget that they will credit back to the businesses. And going into 2018, it's approximately $6.9 million. So it is a bite-sized piece. But we feel very fortunate that they're taking this approach, because it shows our businesses, hey, one, we appreciate you and we appreciate what you do for this economy. And two, we trust you with your money more than we trust ourselves with our money. So, the whole concept of thinking that by, repealing this tax that, you're going to lose revenues, I completely disagree. These businesses are not going to shove the money under their mattress and go home. They are going to reinvest those dollars into new equipment, new jobs. These are going to be revenues that our local governments are going to see time and time again, and I would argue in an even bigger way than they're seeing today. We had a small business. It really kind of put an exclamation point on it for us. Woman-owned, 20-person operation, true small business in every sense of the word. She's a manufacturer for aerospace and healthcare companies, and she indicated to us that she needed to add a $500,000 piece of equipment, and it was because she was getting new contracts, and with that new piece of equipment, she would need to hire a couple of people to operate it. She had the money to buy the piece of the equipment, but she held off doing it because she knew that there would be tax implications, and she didn't know that her revenues would come in as fast as she would need them to pay that tax.
Right.
When I hear stories like that, it just absolutely makes me cringe. We've got two people out there that didn't get hired because the piece of equipment couldn't have been put into place, and this company is not growing at the speed by which they could because of a burdensome tax. And so Faustus and Toole, she came out in a really big way in saying, we support this, and this is on behalf of all small businesses. It's not just big business that's going to be able to participate in it. It's every business at all levels. So we're really pleased to have been a part.
Well, as somebody said a few minutes earlier, I think kind of hits the nail on the head, that you mentioned that you're allowing people to keep more of their own businesses, keep more of their own money. I think that's one of the key differences we see here between the proponents of tax increases and taxes like the business personal property tax, and people like yourself and Commissioner Szabo and Commissioner Francone who voted for this measure. Is I think they realize that what we're talking about is not the government's money. The opposition here sometimes that this is stealing from the public coffers. This is money that's being drained away. Well, it's not your money. I mean, if I was
right.
So I think that's a key differentiation there. Now that said, not everybody's buying it, correct?
Correct. There's always opposition anytime you try to eliminate a revenue source.
Right. So I understand it wasn't unanimous. There was one commissioner opposed. What were his concerns?
So I think, it's just a philosophical difference in opinion.
Right.
When you eliminate a revenue source, it could potentially go to something that the government is doing, whether it be health and human services, public safety, roads and bridges. And I've never known a government entity to say, whoa, we've got too much, or
Right.
we don't, we've got plenty.
And you never will.
It's not something that ever happens. And so, I believe his opinion was that, the county would like to retain those revenues so that they can reinvest them into projects. And we respectfully disagreed. We said we'd like to see you entrust the businesses with this money, and we believe, and we are going to track, that these are going to generate more revenues down the road for you. The other piece of it is, the argument that this will only go to big business.
Right.
And that is not the case. We are not asking the county to credit more than what a business has paid. This is not an unfair distribution. This is what a business is putting in is what they will be credited. So, it is about small, medium, and large size businesses, which we have all in Jefferson County, but 83% of our business community is small business. And so, to say that $1,000 to a small business is not important, I completely disagree. That small business, again, is going to reinvest that. They're going to share it back with their employees. They're going to purchase, a new desk, a new computer,
Right.
And all of those things generate local revenues for the government. So again, I'm a firm believer that, give the business the money. Let's let them invest it. And certainly we appreciate Commissioner Ty's position on that, and it was a very respectful disagreement.
Well, and again, you mentioned the revenue coming back in. I think that's an important point as well. If you're concerned about the amount of revenue coming into a county, why would you restrict growth? I mean, for every job that's created by getting rid of this tax and being able allowing these businesses to hire somebody, is more income tax being paid at some level. Being able to expand a business, open a new location, has more property tax, more sales tax being generated by the by the enterprise.
Letting them live the American dream by reinvesting back into themselves to give back to their communities.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
They're buying groceries. Their kids are going to schools. They're buying homes. They're buying cars. They are investing in their community's future. And honestly, a lot of these companies, if you ask them, they're also investing in nonprofits,
right,
and helping philanthropically. This is not a no-sum game. These folks are invested in their community. They've chosen to be in Jefferson County. And really, we believe that this is an opportunity for us to create a competitive difference. We had a group of site selectors come in a couple of weeks ago from all over the nation, and we did the dog and pony show with them, and at the end of their visit they do an assessment on Colorado and how we rank. And one of the comments that they made was that Colorado is not as aggressive as other places when it comes to incentives. But it was interesting, one of the ladies that was there, she actually stepped out to say, but I was with some folks from Jefferson County, and I find it a huge surprise that a local government would agree to give up something like this as an investment, as an incentive. And
Right.
These are the sort of things that we would like to see other communities do. And, it just really kind of put a little wind in our sail to say, hey, we are doing the right thing, and it is something that others are going to notice outside of our little sphere here in Colorado.
Well, and you are the first county in the Denver metro area to do this, correct?
Correct.
Now, as I understand, I think I had in my column, there is one other county out there somewhere. Do you know which one that is?
Yes, El Paso County.
El Paso.
Did it. It's been almost 20 years ago, so well beyond its years progressively there, and it's been a great tool for them.
I was going to say it's been working.
It has been working.
It was in the Denver Post, I believe 6 months ago, that Colorado Springs is on track within the next 15 or 20 years to outgrow Denver.
Yep. It's been a great tool for them, and I just think in this world that we're living in this environment that we're living in, we've got to do everything that we can to create a competitive edge. Colorado is a phenomenal place to do business, and Jefferson County is absolutely spectacular. We've got the landscape of the mountains in our backdrop, but how do we as a county differentiate ourselves? And this is one way that we can say our commissioners, our county believes in business, and they truly want to be open for business, and they're going to tighten their belt a little bit so that they can prove that to the county, all of the different people and all the different businesses within the county.
Well, and you mentioned nonprofits and charitable giving, which I know is so important at the county level. Who other than these businesses is going to be able to give that amount of money to some of these nonprofits?
That's absolutely right. I mean, this is the biggest funding source for these nonprofits. We want to encourage more of that, and putting $1,000 in someone's pocket, who knows, that may go into a place like the Action Center that's helping to provide food and shelter for this sadly growing homeless population that we have here on the Front Range. So, again, these monies are going to get reinvested. I can't tell you 100% how, but I know they're going to get reinvested. I know these businesses, and we had dozens come and testify before the Board of County Commissioners to thank them for their leadership and to explain how they would reinvest those dollars. So it's a good thing.
Well, I think the key takeaway is that they know better how to reinvest their own money than the government does at any level. So it's said, at least politically, that as Jefferson County goes, so goes the rest of the state. Let's hope that translates. Let's hope that translates with economic policy as well. Last couple minutes remaining. Tell us a little bit about your role, the EDC's role in Jeffco. What you guys are doing, what you have on the horizon, anything you'd like to
you bet.
Let us know about what you do.
Well, it was interesting hearing some of these ballot questions, and our organization has certainly come out in support. The Transportation Sales Tax Initiative, we are very supportive of Let's Go Colorado.
And that's 110.
That is 110, thank you. 110 is something that we believe for economic development, we've got to fix our roads. And we have lobbied in earnest at the state capitol year after year after year after year, and the can keeps getting kicked down the road. Right. And
there's no road for it to be kicked on.
There's
anymore.
No more road that it can be kicked on. The
can gets lost in a pothole.
The hemp conversation is interesting to us as well. That is a growing industry in Jefferson County, and to be able to differentiate the two very different parts of the cannabis plant, the psychotropic side and the CBD side, it's something that's critical to us. Just in the last month, we've had 5 new companies look at Jefferson County. So this is going to be a growing need, not only for Jeffco, but for the state of Colorado. So we encourage voters to say yes on that particular initiative.
Yeah. Points for saying psychotropic on the air. I like that. Well, I think important point here is I think everyone can agree that we do need to fix the darn roads.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I think at least one of these is going to pass. I think we will. That's finally be able to see something happen in that arena, and that'll be pretty positive. Thank you very much, Ms. Pollard.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you both for joining me today, talking about ballot initiatives and an awesome turn that Jeffco took with their repealing that business tax. That's exciting for you guys. Get out and vote this November. Please do that. Also, be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here, and we will be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great day. Thank you.